right, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Save the Track Bike, presented by Hexagon Cycles. That's hexagoncycles.com. I'm your host, Josh, and on today's episode, I have Mehdi Farsi. He's one of the co-founders of State Bicycles, which I'm sure you all know from the State Bicycle team with Addison Zawada, Josh Tyrell, Scott Piercefield, who have all been on the show, to the Undefeated 2, to Riding Fixed Up Mountains with Pros. They're out there, they're supporting the culture, they're sponsoring races, they have their team doing cool stuff. So it was really rad to sit down and have this conversation. So yeah, it's a good one. So let's just jump into it.
Hi, my name is Mehdi Farsi, and I'm the co-founder of State Bicycle Company.
Tell us how you got into cycling.
Oh, yeah. Wow. So, I mean, I guess I grew up riding bikes the same way that I would imagine most kids do. You get a bike and you ride it around the neighborhood, and, you go about with your friends playing and just kind of use bikes like that as a kid. Growing up, myself and my brother, who's also one of the other co-founders along with our friend Eric, myself and my brother, our dad was kind of an avid cyclist. So, I mean, he wasn't someone who was like a Cat 1 competing every weekend, but it is something that, on the regular, he would be out with his friends, enjoying bikes on the weekends. And so we were kind of exposed to, I guess, more cycling than the average person in that sense. And, I can remember fondly spending summers watching the Giro, watching the Tour de France on TV, and then when Lance was out there doing his thing, we actually got to go to France a few years in a row and watch him at the Tour. So, growing up, myself and my brother, we were collecting, cycling trading cards along with basketball and baseball and football cards. So we grew up as fans of the sports, but not necessarily riders individually. I myself was heavily involved in sport taekwondo, Olympic taekwondo, and that took up the vast majority of my time. My brother was into all kinds of other athletics, so we were cycling fans before, I guess, we were riders ourselves.
Yeah, that's really awesome. That's kind of a different kind of history than I hear from a lot of people, so I think that's really interesting that I feel like a lot of fixed gear people, come from skateboarding or BMX and
sure,
and stuff like that. So how did that kind of turn into you being interested in starting a bike company that focused on fixed gear?
Yeah. So, like I said, we had a lot of exposure to cycling, and it was something that was kind of around in our lives from an early age, 8, 9, 10 years old. However, I never really saw, speaking personally, I never had a personal connection or a personal lure to me actually doing it. The thought of riding 50 miles at the time when I was 18 or 19 years old, seemed basically impossible. Something that registered as maybe a little bit boring to me, because the people that I knew doing it were kind of your stereotypical cyclist, getting up way too early. Here in Arizona, it's so hot, so you got to get up at 5 a.m. to go ride, wear the spandex, getting all the gear. And it's just I just couldn't relate to that, especially when you're, a teenager or in college and you got a lot of other stuff going on. It was just something that didn't register with me. But maybe 2007-ish, I started seeing fixed gear bikes around and also online. So this was kind of the early days of social media, and a lot of my friends who got into bikes by various different means, they started posting these fixed gear bikes, and I was like instantly drawn to the clean aesthetic of it, and just kind of the whole attitude around it. You know, it was something I could relate to. I was like, yeah, like I get this. Like you can go wear your street clothes. These guys riding these bikes looked a lot like me. Were running the same circles as I did. So that's what initially kind of piqued my interest. Just kind of the clean lines and just like, oh, this is like cycling for people like me.
Yeah, for sure. I have exactly the same story, almost on the same timeline too. Just like seeing the bikes, my friends started riding them, and then just being like, you know, again, just like you said, like I grew up racing BMX, but like the idea of riding in spandex for like 100 miles or something just seemed insane. But
yeah,
and I do remember right around the time when State started, because that was right around the time I was getting into fixed gear bikes too.
cool.
So yeah, tell me how that all became a thing. Like, what made you guys start a company?
Yeah, so myself, my brother Reza, and our buddy Eric, we were all working together. I had started a company importing kind of like mid-century type of furniture when I was in college, and then 2007, after I graduated, I decided that's what I was going to do full time. So we were doing that, and like I said, those bikes were kind of getting big. And I wanted one for myself. I wanted a fixed gear bike. And at the time, the options were like pretty limited in terms of like locally, I wasn't able to like put one together. Looking around online, you know, you could buy a track frame from one place. You have to buy the crank from somewhere else.
Yep, I remember
wheels
that.
from somewhere else. And pretty quickly start like adding everything up, and you're in maybe $1,500, $1,200, something around that. And it's like, I don't know if this stuff is all going to like mesh well together. I was pretty new to it. I don't know what this is going to be like. And plus, this is like a lot of money for something that I'm just trying to get into it, and I don't know if I'm going to like it. On the flip side, there were maybe one or two options that were, you know, ready to go around $500 off the shelf, but it wasn't something that like these weren't the bike. They didn't look like the bikes that I had seen in the pictures and that I wanted to ride. They weren't things that I wanted to necessarily ride. The quality in doing research wasn't great. The reputation wasn't great. And, you know, for better or worse, like the fixed gear scene at that time was a little bit like, it was kind of pretentious. So like you would be almost like embarrassed or kind of like not taken seriously if you showed up to a group ride, especially as a newcomer riding the wrong thing. So I knew I didn't want to go that route. So, you know, I did research, and through a couple of my connections overseas, we brought in a bike, and the first one we got wasn't great. To be honest with you, I got it, didn't think much of it. I think I threw it on eBay and sold it for like $50 or $100. Got rid of it. And then maybe 6 to 8 months later, Reza and Eric approached me about it, and they were like, "Hey, what happened to that bike? Like, we're starting to see a lot of these fixed gear bikes around. They're really cool. I think we should like take another look at that." And those two were the guys who really kind of championed like the fact that there's like a big opportunity there. And so, you know, the three of us talked about it, and we're like, well, if we're going to do this, we need to like do it right. So that's when we really started doing our homework and really putting together what was initially our first run of state bicycles, which was, source piece by piece, and everything. And I think that's what differentiated us from the get-go. Like, it was something that was well thought out, well curated parts, and didn't cost a ton. And I think was pretty instrumental to our early success.
How did that like progress from that first run of what you did to kind of where you're at now? I mean, I know that's a big ask.
Yeah, that's a big jump. I mean, like, we got that first batch in, and I think we had a company name at that point. I didn't know that we didn't have a website because we didn't have like proper photos and everything of the bikes. So we got the bikes in. So now we got these bikes. We got to do something with it. So we were selling them anywhere we could, like eBay, Craigslist, friends and family, AZ Fix forum, whatever local forums. And I mean, we were right with our gamble. Like, the demand was there for something that like looked cool and was good quality, but didn't cost a fortune. And so luckily we were able to like move those bikes relatively quickly. And, we built up a site and reordered and, we kept just growing it that way. We started off with 7 colors and 3 sizes, and it was what is now our 4130 core line. So we're selling at $429. So our prices really haven't changed even since day one, although I would say, without a doubt, the bike that you buy now in our 4130 line is a lot better than our first run, without a doubt.
That comes with experience and time, just,
Of course, yeah. I mean, we've done a lot of things to the bikes, like, and as you scale, you work with suppliers, you can drive your costs down, right? We're ordering a lot more bikes now than what we initially did, but rather than take that money and put it in our pocket or reduce MSRP, what we've chosen to do is just gradually increase the quality of the bike each year, or every 6 months, or every 18 months. So our initial batch, it wasn't a double-butted frame. It wasn't a sealed hub. Now we have the low pro wheels. The bikes now are probably 4 to 5 pounds lighter than that initial run. And I think we've evolved a lot, and we've come a long way aesthetically too. So, yeah.
Yeah, I remember
overall,
when you guys...
that's kind of how we've evolved.
Yeah, I remember when you guys, like, when I first saw state bicycles, and then all of a sudden you guys were, like, everywhere. Like, we had this, I used to own a little grocery store, and right down the way there was Indie Inc., this place that, like, used to sell your stuff. Yeah,
Indie Inc. So, funny how Denver was kind of one of our, like, Phoenix really helped us get off the ground, Tempe and Phoenix, where we're from. But Denver was kind of like one of our second spots, and I have a cousin there that's on that street. He was at that time, what was his illiterate gallery? Now I think it's called Gildar Gallery.
Yeah,
so
I know that place.
That's my cousin.
Oh, nice.
Well, that's my wife's cousin, but one of my good friends from high school. So yeah, he let us do kind of a little footprint inside that shop, and he was helping us, and then he linked us up with Brooks Pulford, who I don't know if you know him, but
yeah, I know Brooks. Well, I know.
He runs.
Yeah, I kind of know him.
Ride in Denver, and then we like brought the Loops ride to Phoenix. So, yeah, kind of all of that. Denver was pretty critical, like in the early days for us, and it's still like a huge spot for us. I think one of our largest retailers, the Urban Cyclist, is out there.
Yeah, I literally live next door to them.
Okay, yeah. So that, Aaron and them, they're great, and they're one of our larger retailers.
When I had Addison on, we talked a little bit about the history of the bicycle team, but I'm kind of interested to get the story from your perspective on what your guys' thinking was behind that, and those first experiences, like having a team, like racing on your bicycles.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of came together like organically. Like there wasn't really at the time like too many like fixed gear sponsored teams. It was more so like different like crews of people who got together and rode together, like kind of informally, like the Wolfpack Hustle, for example, where there was like a couple different crews out in LA. And a local guy, Jesse Robles, he reached out, and you can actually like find his application. We posted it on our website because it was really funny as kind of a flashback blog post. I'll send you the link after this. But he sent us a ridiculous request to get sponsored. I think he had sold his fixed gear bike because he bought a road bike and he was racing. But he sent us a picture of his quads and, you know, I want all these alley cats, will you sponsor me? And we're like, is this guy trolling us? Is this guy being serious? And we met up with him, and he's just like, yeah, I'll like represent your bikes, and there's this race coming up called the Wolfpack Hustle, and we should go do it. And he was describing it, and he was like, the marathon crash race. I was like, that's cool. And he's like, we should make a team. So he called up his buddy Scott, who you know, Scott Piercefield.
Yep. And
Scott came and picked up a bike as well, like to borrow. And we linked up with another guy we knew, Craig Street, who was like the state champion at that time of road bikes. And those three were like our initial team. And this was back in 2011. And we went out to that first marathon crash race, and kind of no one knew who we were. We were riding just like stock state bicycle stuff. I think maybe the guy switched out their front wheel with something that they had from their road bike, and the stock gearing, stock everything. And they took 1, 2, and 3 at the Wolfpack Marathon Crash Race. There's like 1,000 people there. And that was like, oh wow, we're kind of like onto something. That was a big moment for us as a team, and it definitely turned a lot of heads. And I think that it helped kind of bring attention. We kind of helped fuel the Wolfpack race. The Wolfpack kind of helped fuel our brand as well. And the next year it kind of grew, because the next year the whole mantra was, let's keep these dog tags in LA. And we went and we showed up with a bigger team the following year, and people were cursing at us and people were booing us. And it was awesome. It was like we were the bad guys showing up to take these dog tags back to Arizona. So yeah, that was the start of it. And then, you know, we kept doing more and more traveling, doing the first Red Hook race we went to was Red Hook 5. There were messengers there still racing that race. They were smoking cigarettes like before their race. It was crazy. Like all of our guys top 20, like you know, Craig and Scott, I think were 6th and 8th that year, and it was a lot different than what you see now. But it was starting to get competitive, and it was starting. Road bike guys were starting to get in there, but it wasn't full blown the way it is now.
Yeah, it's like a whole thing unto itself now. Like,
yeah, absolutely. And kind of the philosophy we've always taken. I mean, like Jesse and Scott were like friends of mine. They kind of, I mean, in the early days helped me like navigate like getting into fixed gear bikes, like which group rides to go to, like how to train, like what kind of gear to get, etc. And like we kind of take that same approach with all of our riders in the sense that we create relationships with people, and then we help these athletes get to their races, and we help them accomplish their goals. We're not necessarily out hiring ringers or mercenaries to go compete and just chase a result. Like all of our riders now are people that we've known, and we know they're solid people, and we know that they kind of fit into what I call like the state bicycle family. And we're just promoting that. And these are people that happen to be very talented writers as well. But, we have some kind of a relationship with almost all of our writers. Even Addison, who isn't from Arizona, his backstory is he was out and we would, I think he even told you this, like we'd be traveling at all these various events with him, and he was kind of a lone wolf a little bit, and he would kind of end up hanging out with our guys each time, like hanging out at the hotel, going out on video shoots with us, etc. And he wasn't on a state or anything. And then, eventually we kind of, we came together for a partnership. But, that's kind of how we approached the team. I was initially kind of the team manager. And then like the last 2 years, Addison's kind of taken over because, I don't get to go out to as many events as I used to. That's just kind of how it is. So, he's able to go out and kind of be the eyes and ears and report back and, let me know from a writer's perspective how things went. So we work closely together on the team.
So we talked about the team. We talked about how you guys got started. And then I wanted to get into what some of the highlights over the years have been for you in State Bicycles.
Oh, okay. Yeah, goodness.
I like to ask really big questions, because then what comes to your mind is like,
that's really cool. Fortunately, we've been around for some time. We're like, next year's our 10-year anniversary, and we'll do a whole bunch of like really retrospective pieces and kind of look back on the last 10 years, because there has been so many great highlights for us, and even for me on a personal level, like company-wide. Just kind of riffing, again, like winning that first Wolfpack race was pretty awesome. Like just being out there and seeing the atmosphere of that marathon crash at the time, and then the subsequent years afterwards, was insane. Like those were some of the greatest times, from a more kind of like product centric, company, perspective. When was that? In 2000. Now I can't even think of when we did that. It must have been 2013. 2013, we did a run of collab bikes with the Wu-Tang Clan for their 20th anniversary.
Yep, I remember that.
And that was pretty mind blowing, because I grew up in like middle school, like in high school, and maybe even elementary school, listening to Wu-Tang Clan. Like these were people that were like kind of legendary status. So working with that group was pretty surreal. Going and doing the Simpsons collab was also a huge
and that seems really successful too.
It's going well. We're getting ready to wrap it up after about 1 year. So it was a year duration. But again, like being a kid and like how pervasive the Simpsons was, like as a kid that grew up like in the 90s, like it was everywhere, like globally iconic. I think if you show people in the middle of Asia or Africa or South America a picture of Bart Simpson, they could probably identify who it is, regardless of age. And then like seeing a brand that we created here side by side is an honor, and a reminder of how far we have come as a company. So those in terms of collaborations were big. On a personal level, my duties at State Bicycle is a lot of the product creation, and a lot of the digital content. So I get to go along on all the cool video shoots and stuff. That's usually kind of my realm. So
sweet. That ties into my next question.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
or not really question, but just the writing fixed up Mountains with Prose, I think is one of the raddest projects that, I don't know, I just really get stoked every time a new episode comes out. So yeah, how did that all happen?
So initially, maybe like 3 years ago, maybe more even, Strava put out this blog called The Most Epic Segments, something like that. I'm maybe paraphrasing, but it was like all of these like top, Tour de France stages and everything. And I'm like looking through, and in the United States, there was 7 of them. So there's Mount Lemmon, there was Mount Baldy, there was 2 in Colorado, there's Whiteface in New York, there's one in North Carolina, and there was the last one was in Maui, Mount Haleakala, volcano climb. And so there was like 7 of them, and I'm like, that were deemed epic segments. So they're all HC climbs, and they're all like, if you have a cycling bucket list, go do these. So I was like, we need to like go do these fixed. And so we went and we took a few of the state riders and we did Lemon kind of as a test line. And we went and rode it, and we came back, and our video guy, Saxon, and I worked on it, and we were watching it, and we're like, this is good. Like, you get to know the state riders a little bit, but it just needs something more, like something, I don't know. It was just missing something. It wasn't like compelling. Like, it was cool. It was like cool for us because we did it, but it was like missing something. And then I don't know how the idea came. I mean, I'll take credit for it, I guess. I don't know how I came up with it. I was like, we should get pros on these track bikes, because I mean, they can breeze up these mountains, like, no problem. Like, they have the KOMs on a lot of these segments, like, but let's get them on a fixed gear bike and let's talk to these guys and get to know them, because I mean, we're familiar with their results. We know we're familiar with race numbers and podium spots, but like, how well do you get to know a lot of these riders? Like, anytime you see any content piece, like, I mean, there's a few exceptions. Look, 9 times out of 10, it's like, hey, how did you feel today? Yeah, that looked like pretty hard. Like, what was your secret today? You really had like strong legs. Like, your attack was good. And like, it's like so tactical and so like formulaic, and it's like someone putting a microphone in their face, like, after they just got done riding like 5 hours at a stage. And like, it's very hard for like personality to come through. And then like, also like, if you sit these guys and girls, you sit these people down in a chair and point a camera in their face, they will freeze up. You like don't get the true personality that way. But like, put 2 riders on a bike and they will be having a conversation all day long, and like, it will flow, and it will be organic, and it will be something you'll get information out that is stream consciousness, and that's like authentic and real. Some of my favorite times, like, in my life, are just like going out with either my dad or my friends, and we're just riding, and you're talking, and like, you like finish your ride and you're like, oh, I just rode like 3 hours and it felt like 30 minutes because we were having like a really good conversation. So that's kind of what we tried to capture. And I think we initially intended it as a way to kind of get to know the state riders. And I think that still comes through, but you get to kind of meet these people that you've heard about and don't really know too much about. So I'm glad people like them. I have a lot of fun help make them. I have a lot of fun planning them. And I think it also kind of is a little bit personality driven in the sense that what we talked about, my initial introduction to cycling was from sport road cycling, being a cycling fan. So I think that's kind of unique about State Bicycles because most of these other brands and other companies weren't necessarily coming from that same perspective. So I have perspective in the fixed gear world. I have perspective in the road cycling world, and it's kind of just bringing those two realms together.
Nice. Can you give us any hints of what's coming up with that series?
Yeah, sure. See, episode 5 is shot and done. That was the one I didn't get to go on. So I've been on every single one. So I'm a little bit in the dark about how that one's going to turn out. My wife was due any day with our first child, so I couldn't make that shoot. But we interviewed Corin Rivera, so one of the top American female and top female cyclists in the world.
Oh, that's
so
amazing.
We're really interested in that one. So that one's shot and done. It just needs to be released pretty soon. And then we're gonna, I think, call that season 1, put together a little bit of a highlight tape from the first several episodes and get that up to kind of recap all of them. And we cut so much stuff. That's like the most frustrating thing about it. It's like we need to make these like concise so people will actually sit through them. But we end up chopping so much good stuff. So we're going to throw that all into an episode and get that up. And then we got a lot of conversations for season 2. I mean, the great thing is, like, when I'm pitching cyclists now, a lot of them have already seen episodes, or they have peers or friends that have done episodes. So it's a lot. It makes my job a lot easier.
Yeah.
Those initial ones, like, we knew Travis, so he, like, threw us a bone and did it. But, like, the initial few were, I really appreciate the people kind of, like, rolling the dice and being like, yeah, I'll, like, dedicate an entire day with these guys doing this. So
yeah, I was curious about that response because just doing this podcast and getting somebody on the phone for an hour, it just seems like sometimes it's so difficult, and then you guys get these dudes to go out and ride a fixed gear bike up a mountain.
Yeah, I mean, like, fortunately, even like some of the best cyclists in the world, like Corin, like, at the end of the day, they like love riding their bike. So if they get an excuse to go do an awesome ride, and something that they haven't done before, because as you progress through cycling, it seems like the novelty becomes rarer and rarer, right? So we're presenting kind of a novel experience. I think that's intriguing, and they get to chalk up a day in the saddle as work, and I think it's like a win-win.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest things was Phil Guyman. You rarely ever see Phil Guyman descending anymore. So seeing him descending so fast with Scott on a track bike was amazing.
Phil was great. I mean, all of them were so good. Like, so Travis, we kind of like, we approached that in like, we were like totally in the dark. Like, we didn't know the format. Like, I mean, I'm sure you've seen a few of the episodes, so you see how we do like the title cards to introduce each question and everything. Like, we didn't have any of that stuff in mind. We just kind of shot it and then put it together. And now, as we go through, we have a little bit of a template and a format. So we have some loose framework. But every cyclist and every ride is different, and all of our riders are different. So every episode, I think, has been like very unique, and we want to make sure that these don't get stale. We want to make sure that whatever we're doing, we're asking new questions, you're seeing new stuff, because I could see where after time it would become maybe a little bit formulaic, and we want to definitely avoid that. So that being said, for the next season, we're actually also talking to people who are pros in a multitude of professions, well-known people, but who also happen to love cycling. So don't be surprised if you see maybe let's see, like an NFL player or an actor or someone
Yes.
who is a pro and they like cycling and they do an interview because we want to keep it fresh, and it's riding fixed mountains with pros, but it's not pro cyclists, so it could be anyone.
Nice. I'm excited to see what happens. So what's coming up with State Bicycles?
Oh gosh. See, so we're in spring 2018. Like I said, we are wrapping up the Simpsons line. We did just release the Simpsons Donut Undefeated frame, and we put together a gorgeous dream build. So we will be giving that away, similar to how we did the 3 before. So that contest will come up in the next week or two. So I know people will be super stoked to see that bike. This one is probably my favorite of the 4 now. So that's coming up. We just released spring and summer apparel line. So all new shirts and hats and all kinds of gear. We'll
I got to get some of that stuff
in the fall. And we'll be doing, so that was like lifestyle apparel. We'll also be doing a cycling apparel drop sometime in the summer. And then, State, I think we've never been known for our lack of product releases or our lack of content. So, I mean, there's something, it seems like, every single week between now and the foreseeable future, whether it's new bikes, clothing, or content. We got something in the pipeline between now and like pretty much the end of the year. We kind of talked a little bit about highlights, and I mean, just on a personal level, like one of my favorite things, and it means a ton, like, is when I go out and I see people using our product. And in Tempe, I see it like fairly often because it's like around our office. But if I'm ever outside of Tempe in a different state or anywhere and see our bikes on the street, I'm like so humbled and I'm so thankful. And I don't do this, but I want to find the owner and like just talk to them about their bike, because it like blows my mind every time. And it shouldn't, because we sell a good amount of bikes and I see the orders come through every day. I see where they're going, but like physically seeing it is always just like still like to this day, like very awesome.
Absolutely. That's so good to have that perspective still, because it's hard. I mean, it's easy to lose sight of when, I've owned a small business and stuff before, and it's really easy to lose sight of, or it's easy to lose that attitude. So I love hearing that you still have that.
Oh yeah. I mean, I personally get like butterflies, like before like every major product release and like every content release. Almost like, are people going to like this one? It's like, I shouldn't have that self-doubt, but I think that kind of like small fear, like kind of keeps you hungry and motivated, and like harkens back to the early days of AZ Fix. And it's just like, if I show up to this ride, like, are people going to take me seriously? Like, people were brutal in the early days, and that kind of keeps us on edge, and like we have to continue to top it and make things better every year or every release.
For sure. I still get nervous every time I put out a podcast episode, so
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it's like it's pretty similar. So
for sure.
But the people digging what we do is like the motivation to keep it going. So we love what we do here, and we're excited to keep doing it.
Well, is there anything else you want to say before we head out? And do you want to tell people where to find State Bicycles?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can find us at statebicycle.com. If you are in Europe, check out statebicycle.eu or statebicycle.co.uk for our UK listeners, and also in about 100 plus local bike shops or dealer locators located at the bottom of our site. And yeah, we're on all the major socials. Instagram is probably what we're updating the most, and YouTube. So check out our channels and subscribe and do all that good stuff. And yeah, we try to put out good stuff. We don't try to sell you too much stuff. Like, put out good stuff, and if you want to buy it, like, go for it.
Nice. Well, hey, thanks so much for taking the time to do this.
Thank you. It was fun.
All right, that does it for another episode of Save the Track Bike. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for supporting this podcast. And speaking of support, shout out to my sponsors at hexagoncycles.com. That's Hexagon Cycles. And I wanted to shout out to my friend James from Illicit Cycles, illicitcycles.com. He is just released a new kit. So, good fabrics. Felt it. Seems very comfortable. Illicit Cycles. Go do that thing. FixGearCrit.com. Thank you for what you do. Putting all the podcast episodes on the website. Thank you all for listening. The music is Slag Girl by Vitamin Pets. Visit us at SaveTheTrackBike.com. Visit us on Instagram at SaveTheTrackBike. Until next time, see you later.